Hey everyone, welcome to Car Talk. This is episode 5, and today I just wanted to talk about something that just popped in my head. Basically, look, regardless of your political affiliation, excuse me, regardless of your political affiliation, you should always be respectful of other people. No matter who you are, no matter what you believe, whether you lean left or right, whether you're a hardcore statist or a libertarian, whether you're a fascist or a communist, or whatever the heck in between, if you advocate for using violence against other people, if you advocate for encouraging others to commit acts of self-harm or perhaps suicide simply because you disagree with someone politically, you are evil. Now listen, I came across a lady, or actually it was a guy, on Twitter the other day, and that's what gave me the idea for this video. So he was a social democrat, a Bernie bro, and listen, like I said, I agree with Bernie Sanders a little more than 40% of the time. I've got a lot of respect for him despite disagreeing with him on economic policy. It's sad that a lot of his supporters don't show the same mutual respect. They see libertarians as evil people who want to take away their benefits, and basically, they see us as killers, as monsters, as people who want corporations to rule the world while people get poorer and poorer. And, you know, it's just kind of horrible what they think of us. It's like they think we're the scum of the earth or something and won't even talk to us. At least this guy. I'm not saying all social democrats are like this. I actually have quite a few friends who are social democrats, and they're good people. Some of my favorite YouTubers, i.e. Shoe on Head, are social democrats, and I have a lot of love and respect for Miss Shoe on Head. She's a fantastic person, but I think it's so ridiculous when partisan elites, they call us fascists, they call us corporate-loving, people-hating, murderers, basically. I have quite a few I've had 3 or 4 now call me a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a bigot. They assume I'm a Trump supporter simply because I support the free market. I oppose a $15 minimum wage. I oppose gun control. I oppose the welfare state. Right? They assume I'm a Trump supporter, and they immediately call me these things that I simply am not. Look, my best friend is dating a transgender man. Okay, if I'm a transphobe, if I'm anti-LGBT, that wouldn't be the case. He wouldn't be my friend at all, because religious bigots, anti-LGBTQ bigots, wouldn't allow and wouldn't be incredibly supportive of their friends who are pro-LGBTQ, who are members of the community. I have a number of friends who are gay, who are lesbians, who are bisexual, and a few who are transgender, and I love every single one of them. I have a lot of friends who are people of color, a lot of friends of a number of different races, religions, and I respect every single one of them. I don't see myself as superior to anyone due to my race. I don't use racial slurs. I am in no way a racist. I am in no way a sexist. I am in no way a bigot of any kind. And I will go out of my way to support equality, to support love and friendship, and to say, fuck race, fuck religion, fuck anything that is divisive. We need to love each other more. We need to stop being so divisive, and advocating that individuals commit suicide simply due to political disagreement is wrong. It will always be wrong, regardless of what your political affiliation is. And you know what? In my opinion, this is part of why Donald Trump won the presidency. If Democrats weren't such idiots, especially on Twitter, if there weren't so many leftists out there who were hateful assholes who wouldn't listen to people on the other side, if there weren't so many people demanding for safe spaces and trigger warnings and shit like that, the Democratic Party could have actually won the 2016 election. And if they didn't nominate Hillary Clinton, honestly, listen, Hillary Clinton is literally a neocon disguising herself as a Republican, right? The war in Libya, that was all her. Arming Saudi Arabian terrorists, that was her, right? There are countless examples of her and Obama bombing the shit out of innocent people in the Middle East. And suddenly the anti-war left comes back when Trump is threatening war with Iran. Look, I get the fact that Trump's a hypocrite. Trump called out Obama for doing the same thing, and now he's doing it, right? That makes Trump a hypocrite. That doesn't make Democrats overall any less anti-war, especially the Biden kind, the Obama kind, the Hillary Clinton kind, right? Now, I have a lot more respect for the actual anti-war left. The Tulsi Gabbards, the Bernie Sanders, even Pete Buttigieg, for God's sake. Right? There's a lot of respectable people on the anti-war left. There's also a lot of very bad people on the left who are trying to buy their way into the election. Mike Bloomberg comes to mind. Mike Bloomberg is a terrible person. Mike Bloomberg is for basically abolishing the Second Amendment, taking away our rights, raising taxes, not just on the wealthy, but on everyone. And he's literally buying his way into the 2020 election. And he's in third place. How can this guy he's only been in 2 debates so far? Liberals don't actually like him. Progressives hate him, in fact. He's a multi-billionaire. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars on ads over the past couple months, while every other candidate, they don't have that kind of money to spend, right? So they spend a quarter of what he has in way less, or in way more time, because no other candidate has the kind of money that he has, and that gives him an unfair advantage over other Democrats. Now, there's quite a few things I agree with Democrats on. Ending the wars overseas. Ending the war on drugs. How about some criminal justice reform? Do whatever we can to hold bad police officers accountable, hold county sheriffs accountable, hold bad judges and juries accountable. I stand strongly in favor of jury nullification. If someone is arrested for a drug conviction, right, we can, through jury duty, we can nullify. We can voice our opinions, and we can basically set a man free, even if he's in violation of the law. If the law is unjust, as Thomas Jefferson said, if any law is unjust, it is the duty of a moral man to oppose it. Right? Now, the whole concept of libertarianism is based around, well, there are a lot of laws out there that are unjust. So, the Libertarian Party aims to abolish these laws, whereas there are people out there, anarchists called agorists in particular come to mind, who engage in something known as the counter economy. Now, the counter economy is illegal. So what? Right? What it is it's things like, it's called the gray market. Many of them participate in the black market, but not all of them. The gray market is things like, basically, you collect your own rainwater, you have your own water, you have your own electricity, you have your own, basically, it's advocating for self-sufficiency, because the whole, because once enough individuals are entirely self-sufficient, at least according to agorist philosophy, this government itself will be obsolete, and it will eventually just basically fade away, right? There are also many libertarians who engage in civil disobedience, right? Adam Kokesh comes to mind. Very intentionally possessing marijuana, very intentionally, maybe smoking a joint in a place where it's illegal. Why? Because that law is unjust, right? There's no reason anyone should be locked in a cage or should be given any kind of fine for smoking a plant, because smoking this plant harms no one. And I'm so glad the majority of Americans now agree with this. So we can finally decriminalize cannabis on the federal, right? On the federal level. And I'm very, very glad this is the case. Okay. Another thing I wanted to talk about today is, right, third parties and the Electoral College and ranked choice voting and, proportional representation. Okay, so let's start with third parties. The largest third party in the United States right now is the Libertarian Party. Okay, so the Republican Party has, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have over 30 million registered members, whereas the Libertarian Party only has over 500, some over 500,000, right? So it's dramatically smaller than all other parties. Nonetheless, it's dramatically smaller than the two major parties, but it is actually the largest and fastest growing third party. Nonetheless, it is now a household name. For the past 3 election cycles, we've been on the ballot in all 50 states, and that's something incredible. That's amazing progress. I joined the party this year. This is my first election cycle, and I'm excited for it. But anyway, the ability of third parties to gain anything in an election is stunned by the existing system. Now listen, I don't say we should completely abolish the Electoral College. Democrats, I see your point when you say the Electoral College, right, it isn't fair. It gives people in small states power over people in more popular states. The popular vote, right, if the majority of people support a certain candidate, then in your opinion, the majority should rule. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, as long as the majority isn't able to violate the Constitution. At least as a pragmatist, that is my view. Now, I'm also a big fan of anarcho-capitalism, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm living in the here and now, where we're not in an ANCAP society, so I need to use here and now policy to shrink government as best I can. Now, anyway, I started to say, Democrats, I see your point about the Electoral College, and I think, to be honest, third parties in general should oppose the existing Electoral College because it gives power to the two-party system, right? So what we have right now is, not only do we have a system where 13 people in the smallest state in the country count as much as one person in the most popular state in the country, we also have a situation where we have red states and blue states. And so the election is decided by about 13 swing states, right? And the problem with first past the post voting is it encourages a two-party system because of something known as the spoiler effect. So basically, if a third-party candidate leans a little more to the right, they'll take a few more votes from the moderate right than the left, and then the left ends up winning. Or if a third-party candidate, leans a little more progressive, they'll take a few more votes from the left, and the Republican candidate will end up winning. So, over time, third parties disappear or become largely irrelevant because they act as a spoiler. Now, in a ranked choice system, there would be no spoiler effect, because if the third party candidate you believe is number one doesn't get the high enough, basically if they get the least amount of votes in round one, they get knocked out. And then you're round two, and then you're round three, until someone gets over 50%. Now, another thing we can do with the Electoral College, since, sorry Democrats, but you can't abolish it. The reason you can't abolish it is because there's no way you'll ever get the vast majority of both the House and the Senate and the vast majority of the states. It's just not possible, right? The Electoral College is embedded in the Constitution, so you need a constitutional amendment to change it. Now, what you can do is you can alter it. You can change the Electoral College itself, rather than abolish it. You can implement a proportional representative electoral system rather than a winner-take-all system. So basically, I'm here in Utah, right? Utah is a deep red state. 70% of Utahns vote Republican. The only exception is Salt Lake City. So for the most part, outside of Salt Lake, people who vote Democrat don't get any say whatsoever. But in a proportional system, the Electoral College votes are split rather than winner take all. So 80% or 70% of Electoral College votes would go to the Republican, while only 20% of Electoral College votes would go to the Democrat. It splits proportionally. Likewise, this would help Republicans gain ground in California and New York, which are pretty much Democratic hardcore states, right? It would be, 60% or 70% Democrat and 30% Republican, and that would help the Republicans in that sense. It also would give, right, third parties some representation as well. So say you had 100 or so total representatives. I know that's more than any other state has, but this is just a hypothetical. So say you had 100 representatives, and the Libertarian Party gets, say, 5% of the vote. The Libertarian Party gets 5 Electoral College votes that way, right? And this is also how they, I believe in the UK, how they have so many political parties through their whatever it's called, right? Or it might not be the UK, but somewhere in Europe, this works really well because they have a dozen different political parties that give voice to far more people, right? Because the whole point of this, in my opinion, is the simple fact that very few people identify consistently with either major party, right? This is why over 40% of Americans identify not as Democrat, not as Republican, but as politically independent. Truth be told, neither major party cares about you. Neither major party gives a shit about the American people, right? They're both drowning in corruption. They both love war. They're both fiscally irresponsible. They're both, well, I would say borderline tyrants. Right, and there's bad things about both sides. I'm not going to say one party is better than the other. I will say I have some respect for people in both parties. Particularly, Democrats who advocate strongly for ending the forever wars, ending the war on drugs, pardoning nonviolent felons, pardoning whistleblowers, things like that. And Republicans who are in favor of balancing the budget, ending the forever wars, ending the war on drugs, strongly defending our right to bear arms. I don't know, things like that. Democrats who are for immigration reform, so we don't have overcrowded facilities, so we don't spend billions of dollars trying to process these migrants, so we can, let more of them in, let them assimilate, right? Because despite what Republicans are fear-mongering about, right now, we actually have more people leaving this country than we have people coming in. And we have millions of people wanting to come in. We should let them in. We should let more people in, right? I'm not saying, 100% open the borders. Oh my God. The term open borders has so much freaking stigma behind it, though. And it shouldn't. Because open borders simply means you're free to go from one place to another as you please, right? Remember, a wall that is capable of keeping migrants on the other side out of the United States is also capable of keeping us in the United States, right? There are millions of people out there who want to leave their native country, but are not able to because of border restrictions, either in their own country or in other countries. Free movement allows you to escape tyrannical government. It allows you to migrate to other countries so you can, assimilate. You can, whether you want to be more free or whether you want a different culture, you want to experience something different, and it allows you to do that. It allows people from poor countries like Haiti to come to the United States for, say, better economic, better economic, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Better opportunity. And it allows, in general, life to be better off. So I don't like the stigma, especially among Republicans, with the term open borders. With that being said, we can't completely open our borders as long as we have a welfare state. Because that will, obviously it will flood our nation with migrants. Many of them, because they don't have a lot of money, they'll want to go on welfare, and then we'll end up bankrupting ourselves even more than we are now, right? Taxes will go up, no doubt about it. Socialist culture would certainly take part, right? So I don't say open our borders right away. I say immigration reform now, let a few more people in. Do what we can to restrict the welfare state, or perhaps if we can abolish it, localize it, privatize it. And there are a lot of people out there, unfortunately, who are fear-mongering, who say, look, without welfare, people will die. Without welfare, right, it's impossible for charity alone to help people, right? That's simply not true. Between family, friends, community, charity, church, and I'm not even religious, but I don't doubt the fact that church helps a lot, right? Your local communities alone can sustain far more poor and needy people than federal tax dollars. Truth be told, when you say you want federal tax dollars to go to welfare, truth is, less than 1% of it ends up going to welfare. The majority of it ends up going to warfare, or it goes to a bunch of ridiculous things like testing the sexuality of squids and shit like that. It's completely ridiculous. Literally, the federal government spent billions of dollars on a self-cleaning toilet in Washington, D.C. It's freaking ridiculous, the things that they spend their money on. And do you honestly trust the federal government to give to poor people, to give to hungry people, to give to the needy? I don't. I trust private citizens with my money a lot more than I trust the federal government, because I know that if I give $1,000 to a private charity, at least 800 of it will go to people in need. Whereas if I give $1,000 to the federal government, maybe $1 or $2 will go to people in need. The rest of it will go to war. It'll go to mass incarceration, it'll go to the police state, it'll go to a countless wasteful government spending solutions. So really, honestly, if you're being honest with yourself, you should oppose the welfare state. You should oppose, honestly, any policy from the federal government that involves the redistribution of people's wealth. That is not, and that never was, the duty of the United States federal government. Right? Should the United States federal government exist at all, its sole duties should be to regulate interstate commerce. That means conflicts between two or more states, solve. Regulate interstate commerce. Secure our borders, protect our nation. We need a military, maybe. But our military also doesn't have to be so damn big. And we don't have to have thousands of military bases in foreign countries. We don't have to have tens of thousands of American soldiers die every year, right? So we can have a military, but we don't need a military costing us over $700 billion a year. We don't need a military killing people overseas and having soldiers die constantly. So we need to bring the troops home, right? And only deploy the troops when there has been an official congressional declaration of war. Now, in all actuality, I would prefer this not to be the case. I would prefer to abolish the federal government entirely and replace it with the free market. I know that sounds kind of absurd, but if you read Murray Rothbard, he explains it very well, right? Because, right, the government does not actually have a legitimate right to rule you. The right to rule comes from tradition. It's really, the whole idea of government is one appeal to tradition, and it's propagandized with this idea that anarchy equals chaos. It's quite the opposite, actually. The term anarchy actually comes from the Latin roots, the term an meaning lack of or opposition to, and archy coming from the root archon meaning rulers. See, there are many different kinds of anarchists. As I mentioned, agorists and anarcho-capitalists. There are also anarcho-communists, anarcho-syndicalists. There are mutualists. There are egoists. And there's a bunch of different anarchists, right? All anarchists believe that the federal government, or that, government in general should be abolished, right? Anarcho-capitalists believe that government should be abolished because they do not believe that the government has the legitimate right to monopolize law and and courts and rights protection in general and military and things like that. Anarcho-capitalists believe that if I want to opt out of any given government service, I should have the right to do so. Because all moral forms of human interaction should be voluntary rather than forced. Now, with the existing federal government, you are coerced into paying your taxes, and you are coerced into obeying these laws, most of which are unjust. In an anarcho-capitalist society, the sole duty of rights protection agencies, if that's what they're called, is to secure your rights to life, liberty, and property, and to arbitrate anyone who opposes your rights. The existing federal government does a lot more than that. And listen, I'd settle for a minarchist state where the federal government or where any government only protects your rights to life, liberty, and property, and only arbitrates people who are legitimately bad, people who violate the non-aggression principle. But, as I said, because all human interaction should be voluntary, then I should have the right to opt out of any government service that I don't want. So if I don't want your protection, if I don't want your arbitration, I should be allowed to not pay taxes on, say, arbitration and protection. Or I should be able to pay a different agency. Government, if you may want to call it that, these rights protection agencies essentially work as insurance firms. So they ensure that you are justly, compensated for any crime, that you are protected, that your rights are protected. Now, police today don't have any right, don't have any constitutional, right? They are not obligated to protect you. The phrase protect and serve is a lie. Is a lie. The Supreme Court of the United States has actually ruled that police officers in the United States have no obligation to protect or to serve the American people. They protect themselves, and their sole duty is to enforce the law. So they protect the politicians. They protect the bureaucrats. They don't protect or serve the people. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying all cops are terrible people, but we would be a lot better off if law enforcement were privatized. Because rather than enforcing some kind of law, some kind of thing that applies to every single person on earth, or every single person in a given territory, which government does not have a legitimate right to, but claims monopoly over, even though most of them haven't explored. Seriously, how does it not boggle your mind that an organization that's thousands of miles away from your location rules over you? Like, how does that not boggle your mind in the least bit? Or even something hundreds of miles away. Like, and the fact that they're people. The fact that they're people. They're not aliens. They're not gods. Right? I could totally understand the argument for the divine right of kings. If kings are appointed by God, then kings have the right to rule, right? Democracy is nothing like the divine right of kings. Democracy is saying that, listen, two people say that we should eat the sheep for dinner. One person says that we should eat the veggie for the grass for dinner. The sheep happens to be the person who's voting for the grass, and the wolves happen to be the people wanting to eat the sheep. So the wolves, guess what happens in a democratic system? The wolves eat the sheep. And that's a violation of the non-aggression principle. You shouldn't eat other people. Right? Some argue that the very existence of government is, in and of itself, a violation of the non-aggression principle. So the argument for anarcho-capitalism is that I should not be coerced through paying into a territorial monopoly that I did not consent to. I do not consent to your rulership simply by being born in your country. I did not consent to your rulership simply by owning property that is in a territory that you claim monopoly over, but that, in my opinion, you do not have legitimate right to rule over. Democracy, republic, none of this is legitimate according to anarcho-capitalists. And they have a really, really good point. Right? So in an ideal world, there would be no government, but instead, there would be communities. There would be, rights protections agencies. Just read Murray Rothbard. Read freaking Hans Hermann Hoppe. Read all these other anarcho-capitalist philosophers because their ideas are fantastic. Now, do I think we're going to see a society like that in this world, like in the modern age? No. So while anarcho-capitalism is an ideal, it's not the reality. It's not something that the majority of Americans will be able to grasp as a concept. So, what do? Well, that's where the Libertarian Party comes in, right? Because it's not possible in this society, in this world, to just get rid of the government. This party is here to shrink it down to its basic essentials. This party is here to say government should only be here to protect the rights of individuals to life, liberty, and property. And to, right, by extension, protect the American people to, as I said, the federal government regulate interstate commerce, right? Basically, enforce the non-aggression principle. That's the only legitimate duty of government as it exists. And that is, in a nutshell, why I choose to register as a libertarian and vote libertarian. Again, both major parties are controlled by large corporations. I know you may not agree with me as an ANCAP, but whether you're a minarchist, or classical liberal, any kind of liberal or conservative for that matter, if you believe in limiting government as much as possible, because the corruption has gotten way out of hand, right? If you're, some would say, a fiscally conservative, you believe in balancing the federal government and cutting spending, in responsible spending in general, and socially tolerant, socially liberal, you could say, pro-LGBTQ, in favor of equality between, everyone, whether it's minorities or, everyone. If you believe, right? Now, another thing I wanted to talk about is discrimination, because discrimination is something a lot of people take issue with. A lot of people talk about libertarians in an ill way, because the majority of libertarians, even libertarians who are African American and say of other races in general, right? Even they oppose the Civil Rights Act of, 1964. Now, here's the thing. Discrimination is terrible. It is wrong to discriminate against an individual for their race, for their religion, for their ethnicity, for their gender, for their sexual orientation, but it happens. Now, the reason we oppose the Civil Rights Act is not because we hate minorities. It's because, first of all, legislation can't and won't ever eliminate bigotry, right? Making discrimination in business illegal doesn't stop discrimination in business. It only puts it underground, right? Business owners will still refuse to hire African Americans. They may treat African Americans poorly, right? They'll still do that. But they won't be as open about it. Now, when you eliminate the law, you allow them to be open about it. Now you know exactly who the bigots are, and you can avoid their businesses. So you can drive them out of business. You can either force them to change, force them to bend to not discriminate, or threaten them with losing their business. Because in today's society, there's no chance that a racist or sexist or generally bigoted business can actually be maintained. Or if it can, big deal. Listen, if it's not hurting you, if it's not engaging in an act of aggression, you don't have a right to the services that other people create. So listen, I hate racists. I'm going to avoid the heck out of businesses owned by racists, but racists still have the right to own businesses and to operate on people, or to provide services for people who they believe in, right? Because another part of libertarian philosophy is right? As I mentioned before, voluntarist philosophy is that all human interaction, all moral forms of human interaction are voluntary. When you force people to not discriminate, when you force... See, all laws, at the end of every law is a man with a gun. I believe that we should resolve conflicts whenever possible without the need of that gun. Democrats, on the other hand, and even most Republicans, will say, no, that gun is needed most of the time. I disagree. We can solve our conflicts without getting government involved. A business is bigoted. Fuck you, bye. I don't think we should force our will on businesses we don't like. And let me give you a quick history lesson. You know, the whole reason the Civil Rights Act was even a thing, if you remember, if you actually read into history a little bit, you'd know Jim Crow laws forced businesses to discriminate. Most private businesses in Virginia in particular, or many of them, didn't want to discriminate, and they actually encouraged people to violate the law. They actually encouraged people of color to come into their businesses and to participate in their services against the law. Right? So the whole idea that anti-discrimination law is even needed is wrong, because businesses themselves back in the day, the majority of them were very in favor of people of color. And there's no way in hell that a business can survive today by, well, being discriminatory. So anyway, those are my 2 cents. I apologize for it being 40 minutes long. I'm going to split it into 2 parts. Thank you. Bye.